All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to CSUN Performance Ensembles, A Conversation With. I'm your host, Samantha Garcia.
And I am still not Jefferson Denham until Jefferson Denham comes back. My name is Fernando Martinez.
And here we have again with us, I wasn't here last week, unfortunately, but we can't get enough of Mr. Mark Farrell over here. Say hi, Mark. And he's one of our favorite people in the world. And we're so excited to have him back again. So in this episode, we're gonna just delve a little deeper into some of the points that were mentioned last episode. I did my homework. I watched the whole episode. I took some notes, so I'll be referencing my notes here and there because there are some really cool things that were said, and I want to talk a little bit more about it. Because as you know, if you did watch last episode, Mark is part of the group that the group of students during the semester where they switched performance ensemble from in-person class to online. And he was a part of that whole chaos. So I think that's very special and important and relevant especially for right now and for future students. So I'm gonna pull some quotes from Mark and see where this goes. But I did want to start with asking a question. And so as you guys spoke about it last episode, you were a student during the transition. And during that time, did you perceive the change to be more of a crisis or more of a learning curve?
Well, if you're referring like specifically to performance ensemble, and because it was like part of a
yes, performance ensemble specifically.
Crises or learning curves. I would say it didn't feel like a crisis. It really didn't. Everyone was, I would say, yeah, it was treated as a learning curve, and I was going with the flow. I didn't determine what it was for me. I just kind of I went with the feelers that I'd put out, or that I always, I guess, have out, and yeah, what I got back was that everyone was dealing, and it was a reaction to a situation, which yeah, it was a more extreme situation than we normally react to on a 5 second by 5 second basis. So it was just a more extreme version of what we do every day, which is adapting to, it's like, action, reaction to reaction, and down the line. But it was maybe a larger version of that. So it felt like I would say I would characterize it more as a learning experience than a crisis. And that comes from the collective attitude, not from my own internal. It wasn't internally determined.
That's awesome. That's really cool. And the fact that the whole group was able to collectively just deal and move forward, because, in another situation, maybe someone else could have seen it as a crisis. Like their whole piece that they may have thought that they wanted to do could only be done in person. But I mean, I look at us now, I guess you could do pretty much anything.
We did have leadership. It didn't just happen. I mean, it was.
Oh yeah, no, always.
We were all looking, to Jade and the experienced members of PE for how to proceed. And yeah, and it was, what we got back was, let's calmly proceed and deal. And we did.
I think you can see that in the finished product. Me and Fernando talked about it, America in 3 parts. We talked about it a few episodes ago, and just how seamless and how much it was able to emulate a real life performance with, being able to count down when you're going to premiere.
Yeah.
Like, you could just sit there and the show's about to start kind of feel. It was all still there.
Yeah. And we had top-notch technical, like, production expertise involved all of a sudden too. That wasn't necessary before, but it was available to us because of the social network, I guess. And
but that's the thing, though. That's the thing, and sorry to interrupt, but like you were saying, Sam and Mark, to like how it was so seamless. And granted, a lot of that does have to do with production value, right? The way that it was actually produced and edited and all that. But I mean, you can't have a good show, even if it's edited well, you can't have a good show unless you have a performance there in the first place, right? Like the product doesn't exist without the performance. So for you guys to have done, for you all to have done the performances the way that you did still is kind of mind-blowing, because I don't know about you, Sam, but I would have freaked out having to do the performances that I love doing and transition that to online. I wouldn't have.
Yeah.
I wouldn't hang, you know?
Yeah. I mean, it wasn't ideal, but, you know, we dealt. So it was, yeah, it was, and it, yeah, it was the product of a lot of people. And I think that if I can just speak for myself, and I'm not, it's hard to say, but like I said, I have a hard time watching myself, but because you know what you're thinking. So I don't know how much of the struggle or the negative emotions involved came out, you know, were projected. So if there were similar experiences to mine held or had by everyone else, that's a lot of negativity and things to overcome that we'll never be aware of. You know what I mean? That was inside each individual performer, and they overcame that, produced what they produced, making it look pretty effortless. And so as an outsider or an audience member, spectator, you'd be like, wow, cool, it's business as usual. And you would never know the struggle that's behind it. Yeah, if I had to multiply my own experience, yeah, that's a lot of struggling, I guess, internally with yourself. And
Exactly.
self-doubt, I guess, is a big part of it, because you're like, I'm going to look like crap up there, you know, or on that video chip or whatever you want to say.
Video chip.
Frame. You can't say frame anymore. We don't use that technology, but that video sensor. I still don't understand digital photography, but but you know what I mean. If I use the word frame, celluloid frame, it's the same thing, same allegory.
Totally. And I think what you just said is a perfect segue into talking about something that you said last episode. You mentioned that the first live performance you did with the ensemble, you kind of felt this, like that there was this puddle inside of you, mm-hmm. and the live audience members kind of almost like drew that puddle energy out of you, and that was really part of the experience. Mm-hmm. I was wondering if you thought that, if you think that others can experience that same feeling with this new way and new format of the class.
I think the key to that, the best we're going to get, or the closest element, the thing that's going to make it that is the real-time aspect, the synchronous aspect. That's the thread to hold on to. I was thinking about that. There's the mediation. You don't feel, there's no subconscious cues like smells, temperature. This is not my voice. It's coming through a small, whatever, paper membrane on the speaker. But that's stuff I think that your body notices and you're unaware of. So that's lost, sort of. But the real-time aspect, and that's the part where I was talking about, where you can't go back, and you know someone's seeing you in real time, and you move forward and you move forward, and you accept every imperfection, and you're no longer the judge of what went wrong and what went right. It just keeps going. Yeah, so I think there's definitely the real-time aspect can keep that element. That being aware that your audience is watching you in real time still pulls that energy from you. But there's still something missing, I think.
So like if it's a synchronous show but still online, you believe that can still happen?
Yeah.
Perfect.
And if it's not, it's the same as, you know, a televised or a movie. It's a production.
Exactly. Yeah, it's a film, and that we've all been moved by films and things like that. I guess the
next, like if you were gonna put it in a hierarchy, the next step down would be a one take, like you know, like Birdman or like that Alfonso Cuarón did in Children of Men. There's just like, if you do a one take, that's got a lot more of that would pull that out of the performers in a one take shot. Then if you've got a shot that's segmented and edited, and someone like does an action, like pat someone on the back, cut, then you go to your trailers and you come back and film the guy, you know, that reaction to the pat on the back the next day, and then edit the two together and film. That would be the extreme end of that spectrum of just no spontaneity. How do you pull a performance? Or you're not going to feel that pull. You can still generate the performance, but it's going to take a lot more. You're generating it in an internal reality. There's not an external reality pulling the performance out of you, sort of.
You know what you said, obviously everything that's performance, a lot of it just has to do with the way that you it's subjective, right? Like it's whatever it is that you get out of it, that's the meaning of the performance, even if that's not the intended meaning of the performance and all that stuff. But it's just like hearing you say all these things in response to Sam. It makes me feel like, and I don't know if it's true, this is me making an assumption that maybe one of the most important aspects of performance isn't even like just beyond the fact that it can be synchronous or live, is the fact that you have the ability to like mess up, basically, like making the mistake is part of it. And I never even thought about that. Like I really don't. Like, and it's funny because we've all made mistakes performing. I'm sure like maybe we missed our cue, and I mean we both know Sam that we've had a lot of goofs on stage. Maybe not us, but maybe other performers. And do you I don't even know where I'm trying to get at with this. It's kind of insane to me that I guess the most important part of performing is the fact that you're making the mistakes. And obviously when you're doing it online, you don't submit your performance when you messed up in it. Obviously you're going to redo it over and over until it's perfect. And
Yep.
I don't know, I guess, do you think that sort of detracts from the performance itself? Right? Because obviously to me, I assume the context changes, right? Because if you're doing something that's online and it's not live, I guess it seems reasonable to want to put something that has no mistakes in it. But do you think that it'd be, I don't know, I guess better, or maybe it's something that people should experiment with to maybe upload parts that do have mistakes in it? Like, is there any value to that?
That should almost be a requirement, actually. That what you just said like covers so much of the core of what it's a better way of saying what I was trying to say, almost. You know what I mean? Like, I'm not saying it addresses the exact, like replaces what we were talking about before, but you really hit like a core thing. Like when I said it should be a requirement, I think it would be at least good to experiment with that as a requirement. Like you are required to do one take, and I don't know how you'd say, you know, we're going to make sure that you obey these requirements, but say everyone did, you'd get a lot of more interesting work. I call them happy accidents. I know it's not a new idea, and there's probably a more official or better term for it, but like I like to paint when I do, and I haven't in a long time, but when you paint, my favorite effects in a painting I've done were a mistake, or just a side effect of something I was actually attempting. And then you don't want to touch that part of the painting. You know, now it's like probably the best part. It was unintentional and unexpected. And I think that translates to live performance too. I don't think mistakes detract. I think they add, they humanize. And yeah, could you imagine if there was a way to say, we're going to be sure that you turn in you've got to film it, but it's got to be in one take, and and that's it. When you're done, submit. Like if you had a smart chip in your camera that wouldn't allow you to restart that scene. An AI that recognized, hey, that dialogue sounds familiar, and it shut down or something. I'm trying to think of how that would work logistically, but does the concept make sense? Like, I think you're right. I think that the presence of mistakes and the unexpected, and then your reaction to that, and comes up with, produces something like that you can't really anticipate the value of.
That's so crazy. You guys really just like the question I was going to ask just said almost every word. And I think we're all like in the same, focusing on kind of the same thing. There's a central concept that we're kind of latching onto, which is the integrity and the basically the mission of performance ensemble is it's all about raw and visceral performance. And it's basically everything you guys just said, but I wanted to know if you guys thought that that this format, you know, having to do it on film is detrimental to the original mission of the class, or are there new heights to be reached? But what you just said with the one take kind of thing, I feel like that kind of answers the question already, saying that there's different ways, there's different new ways to go about this so that we can still hold on to the raw and visceral nature of the performance.
Yeah. Sorry.
Yeah, no, just real quick, and I think that maybe this is a question for both of you, actually, because I do want to hear from you too, so I want to know what you think. So I guess the question for Sam would be, why do you think that when we did this in person, right, we we did so much to make sure that there wasn't, obviously we rehearsed to put on our best show, right? Because we wrote the performances a certain way and they were intended to be a certain way. So we wanted to make sure that that's what we presented. And I guess when I think of mistakes, I think of like, maybe you're draped over a black box and at a certain word you're supposed to get up, but you don't get up at that certain word, right? And to me, that's a mistake. Because we know what it is, right? But why do, so this question for Sam is, why do you think that even though mistakes are or can be these wonderful things, why do you think we were so obsessed with like making sure that we didn't have those when the audience wouldn't have known, right? Like obviously they don't know what the mistake is, because everything seems intentional when you're doing, because you're the only person who knows that performance. And for Mark, do you feel like, or what was your experience like doing the online performance? Like, was there a mistake included in your performance and did you keep it, or did you have to reshoot because you felt like there were any mistakes in your performance?
Okay, so I'll answer your question just real quick. I think, because I think that we were so, wanting to perfect our performance, because regardless, it's performance and there's a specific message that is intended to be conveyed. So in order to do that effectively, in our perspective, is to, perfect a performance and put it up on stage and have people receive it in a way that's, legible to them. So, but in the same way, in the same breath, I feel that even though they're the mistakes that no one else will notice, or the mistakes that only we will know, I think we consider them still mistakes because it hasn't been the vision from the beginning to have those in there in order to convey the message. But I think it's still to be able to have that flexibility to, like, you're on, because when you're on camera, I think Mark, you mentioned you had to shoot your shot over and over and over, right? You couldn't get it right until like 40 takes later, which is usually how most people, record. But then that almost takes away from I have to be on, and that's why you have to take it over and over again, because you have to be on when you're in front of people. There's no retake. So I think there's just a different driving force for each one. But I hope I answered your question there. I think that the mistakes, they're important, but we also try to, minimize the amount.
Yeah, no, yeah, you definitely answered it. I think it was interesting to get your perspective on that, because I know that you're the one asking questions here, but I wanted to know what you had to say.
Oh, no,
too.
yeah.
And for Mark, for you, the question was, since you had to do this online, you had to record it, and we're talking about how mistakes can be these sort of beautiful elements in our performance. Did you find, because we just mentioned it right now, right, that you re-recorded your part over and over because you couldn't get it right, and why do you think that was? Was it because you felt like you were making mistakes, or because you felt like you could just do it better?
You always feel like you can do it better. I think this relates to what Sam was saying about you have to be on. The thing is, it's like matter at the speed of light. You can approach it, but you're never going to achieve it. You're never going to be 100% on. And with live performance, you maybe will try harder for that, knowing that you can't go back. But if it occurs and you notice you're not on, you keep going. You have no choice. You're not going to scrap it and throw your hand in the air and say, all right, that's a wrap. I'm leaving. This performance is over. And, you and the audience have to go out to the parking lot. You're not going to do that. And so you're locked in, and which is a good thing, because you keep going. And if I think the existence of happy mistakes, I'm trying not to go off on tangents. I want to stick to, I want to address what we're doing before I move on to this, like, allegory or whatever. But as far as my own performance went, my experience with retaking that, I was out there in the parking structure and in the library trying to film this for probably about 6 or 7 hours before I got that take. And I'm not happy with the take. I just finally said I'm done. There was no, I said I finally achieved, I was finally on. I didn't erase any of the footage I took. I was as close to on, I was closer than the last time, and it was getting late. And honestly, that's as on as I got. And that's what I accepted. Now, in a weird way, it seems like you'd have a better product or a better performance as a result. But I feel like if I had taken my first performance and not stopped, you know, in the middle of it or at whatever fraction into it I was when I gave up and was forced to keep going, I think that would have been a better performance than my last take. I believe. It's just you know, I've got no empirical proof of that. But and as far as happy mistakes in a performance with an audience, I think it has to do, I think, with vulnerability as an artist. I think that we care about our mistakes internally and what our own self-image of and what our image of the final performance was meant to be is harder for us to let go of than anyone else. And we have a predetermined image of ourselves and how this is going to affect everyone. But as an audience member, you recognize somehow the vulnerability that the artist is showing you, and it's appreciated. And I think it's a mechanism. I think it activates the mirror neurons. I think there's like a amplification of empathy in a sense. And like, for instance, and this is the example I wanted to jump to without being abrupt, was, does anyone, I mean, are you familiar with, like, say an episode of SNL or some, or I'll just say blooper reels? People love it. But when it happens in a performance where they can't stop, like Saturday Night Live, when someone starts cracking up in the middle of their skit, it's not supposed to, it's not scripted, but it's probably the most pleasurable part of the show for the audience, because then they identify with the performer and their loss of control, and it endears you to your audience, and there's a connection there that's generated. So I guess that would be a good example of a happy mistake in a live performance. If that makes sense.
That was beautiful.
Yeah, we're just like, wow.
Yeah.
Happy mistakes.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
it's a
love
better
that
word,
concept.
but that's what I call them.
Yeah, I think you should email Jade and be like, you know what, just include all the mistakes.
Yeah, totally.
Start-
And coin that term.
Yeah, start a movement.
I want credit.
Yes. Yes.
Should I patent that? I'll be like Google. I'm going to patent the spectrum of colors. But yeah, they tried to patent white online. And that's whatever. Anyway, that's a different conversation. Yeah, if I could patent everything, I'd be a rich person.
Oh, man. Yeah, you got some great ideas, Mark. And I'm so glad you brought that up, Fernando. And it's just crazy that we're here in this time. And I kind of wanted to bring up another thing that you said last episode, Mark. Sorry, this is the last time I'll cite you. I know it must be just too flattering.
I'm not worried about it. I watched that thing and I was like, I'm opaque. I don't know if people understand what I can't. I'm not a good communicator.
No, you were a communication studies professor for 2 years.
And this is all, yeah, this is, I'm not even sure I know what I'm saying. So yeah, it's good to clarify for my own benefit.
I never know what I'm saying, so it's totally fine. I know. I just sounds just kind of come out, and then the world just becomes what it is.
That's what I like about real time, though, is you're in the formation of the actual thought process in real time. And
exactly.
that's a point of vulnerability in a way. Yeah, feet and mouth kind of thing, you know?
Exactly.
Always at risk.
Oh, yeah. And, well, Mark, so I want to cite you. You said, Fernando asked you a question because, we all think it's a bummer, that you can't perform in person. But Fernando wanted to know if you thought anything is really lost from the class. And you said that there definitely is something lost, but that doesn't mean you don't push forward and innovate. And I thought that was really important for any potential students to hear or anybody that's currently enrolled, because I feel like that's the theme of this time right now, even all of 2020 and everything we've been experiencing as a collective earth dwellers, you know? And you based on like that perspective, do you, Mark, and Fernando, I actually want to hear this from you too. Do you feel that acceptance of change is important for everyone right now with respect to pursuing their passions that involve performance?
Do you want to take it, Fernando?
Uh, sure.
Oh,
Sure. I might talk a lot.
Go ham.
Yeah. Can you repeat the question again?
Yeah, of course. It was a little loaded and wordy and
Yeah.
verbose.
No.
But
No.
I
No.
got
It's just.
you.
It's just the last part. It's just the last part. 'Cause I want to make sure I answer it.
I want to say, based on Mark's statement, that there is something lost, but that doesn't mean you shouldn't push forward and innovate. Based on that statement, and also your own perception, do you feel that the acceptance of change is very important right now for everyone, with respects to pursuing their creative passions, such as performance?
Okay. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. I feel like there's two ways that I want to answer it because it's like kind of differing perspectives, right? The
Mm-hmm.
very first one, I think, from a professional standpoint, just because like right now I'm teaching performance, right? And it's really weird to me because it's community-based performance. And not only do you want people to be together and have them go out and do things for their community, it's a performance class and it's online. And to me, I feel like I've been not that I've been like struggling with accepting it, but I sort of been struggling to maybe accept the fact that I can't teach it the way that I really want to, right? Um, and this goes back to that whole idea of losing something. And I think that, like Mark, maybe some aspects to it are lost, and it does. I think it forces you to be creative, right? And I think a part of that also forces you to just be accepting of the fact that the world isn't the same, and the world will never, ever, ever be the same, regardless of what happens, right? Even if we have vaccines, even if they lift the orders, it doesn't matter. Like the world's not going to be the same. And it sort of changed the way that we do things. But that also brings me, it just reminds me too, because like I have people doing performances where they can't necessarily go outside for safety reasons, so they have to get really creative in how they do things. So like, I think I don't know. I think it's amazing. I think it sucks that it's kind of like a forceful innovation thing that's happening, right? Because it's forcing, like you really don't have a choice. It's either you do it or you drop the class and that's it.
Mm-hmm.
So you have to be accepting of the change and just like roll with the punches. Like, I've seen so many people do like PowerPoints, but perform spoken word over it. I've seen people write an
Wow.
entire song, produce it, and submit that without having to show themselves, but they're still there. So there's that. So like, obviously, I think that you do have to accept change. And then from a personal standpoint, as you know, Sam, I feel like, because like I reached out to you the other day. It's like, Sam, I'm dying over here. I need to perform. Like, let's do something already. And because I don't feel like completely comfortable going out and doing a lot of things, right? Like I want to stay inside. I'm also not insured, so it's like I can't really go out and do things because I can't even afford it if I wanted to, you know. But it's made me think about ways that I could perform, because I just do a lot of spoken word, but you know, there's ways of doing things remotely. I think it really stretches your imagination and having to do things, and you can't get to that point unless you accept the facts. And the facts are, you probably shouldn't be going outside. The world has changed. It's completely different. But yeah, I think that if you don't accept it, you're just negating something that is going to happen anyways, right? So you're just going to be living in denial the entire time. And if you keep living that way and you're trying to perform, well, you're never going to be able to sort of supersede what you've done before. You're never going to be able to grow as a performer because, you know, granted, this is an extreme example, but like this puts you in a very different spot to have to do something that's creative, right? Because you don't have the resources that you had before. You don't have a theater anymore. You don't have the black box. You don't have a giant crew to come help you. Like you don't have any of those things. It's like, so what do you do now? Well, I can go to the beach and stay like 10 feet away from everybody else and just record something. you can be, you know, if you have the necessary funds, like you can buy good headphones that have a good mic on it and then record something. I don't know, like there's just a lot of things you can do, and you can get so creative if you just accept that things have changed. And so that's my really long-winded answer.
That's wonderful. No, it's seriously
I think you
so
put it better
important.
than I could have. I was just gonna say, there's undeniable losses, and then this is parallel to what you're saying. If you can identify those losses and what utility, or what affective utility those may have served, they're gone now. So what purpose or utility effectively did they serve, and what can we do to not replace it, but I don't want to say simulate, but kind of, I don't know. I can't think of the right word for it. It's like simulate, and it's not replace, but because there's no replacement for things that have been lost. They were what they were, and otherwise it would be the next day and everything's the same. But yeah, I think that might be the nature of the innovation, is identifying what utility things have. I hate using that word because it sounds cold and it sounds mechanical, like it's an affect, but it doesn't cover what I'm trying to say either. But what emotional punch did it have? What social purpose did it serve? What did it produce? Or where did it fit in the stream of things that all come together to make what we were doing? And like for instance, I was thinking one of the things we lost in PE when we went online was the downtime. Like, we would not necessarily confine our conversations and our interactions to class or rehearsals. It was hanging out. It was seeing each other in the halls. It was everything in between that, on the spectrum of formally being in class and performing together a rehearsed performance, and seeing someone walk out of the bathroom in the hall and say, hey, what's up? And having a conversation that might change everything. So it's like, how would you replace that element, And that's the thing with this online type Zoom meetings and socialization, is it's so structured. Can you kind of sand the edges off to make it less formally structured? I don't know. Does that make sense?
Yeah. It's mind blowing. Yeah.
Innovate. I guess you'd first have to know, are you going for the same thing even? You're going for something close probably, but I guess rather than looking at how do we achieve what we used to achieve, it's how do we replace the components that achieve that with what we have now?
Yeah, I actually have that was you have really mind-blowing answers, but every time that you respond with something, it makes me want to ask a question. And you asked maybe we're doing it for something different, right? It might be similar, but it's something different. And again, a question for both of you. And I guess the question is, what exactly, like when you were writing your performances, or when you were thinking of ideas in terms of what you wanted to perform for a show, right? Like, what was your goal, right? Because I remember clearly when I wanted to write, I just wanted to write for myself, right? Because I wanted to tell my stories, because I don't see myself as a very outspoken or very loud person, and so it's really hard for me to say anything, and so this gave me that opportunity to say something. But the other thing is, I wanted it to leave an impression, and I think to me leaving an impression was more specific than that. I wanted to hear people respond audibly, right? Whenever I would write about my experiences growing up in maybe the seedier sides of LA, I could hear people in the audience kind of laugh, or it's oh yeah, whenever I was talking about Cortezes and all that stuff, there were people in the audiences who were wearing it and they're oh yeah. Or Drew, I heard Drew gasp a little bit, and I'm this is why I want to perform. This was my intention. That's what I wanted to do this for. And so my question to you guys is, what did you perform it for, right? And I think this answer is going to be interesting because Sam, you did this for a live audience, and Mark, you did this technically for a live audience, but then had to do it for an online one. And did that intention change when your medium changed, right? When you went from live to online? So, I'm really curious to see what you guys have to say.
Wow. Well, for me, I really just, I think I came out of the womb just loving to perform. And it has to do with all those elements, hearing Drew's gasp and Marianne's woo, and just there's nothing like the feeling of a live audience. And I've, always loved that since I was a baby. And it's just something that you just can't replace. And my intention with my performances was to honestly probably just make it as much fun for me and for everyone else as possible, because that's just kind of the person that I am, and it translates a lot through performance, because I just want it to be just like an enjoyable experience to where people can just kind of forget about whatever for a little while and kind of like enjoy the show. And that's at least for me, that's what I individually brought to the table, just like from me, because that's how I am. But we couldn't do with just that, because performance ensemble has much more richness to it rather than just the fun performance part. So having other people and blending them with my performance background was it just created an even more meaningful intention.
And Mark, what about you?
Yeah, I'm trying not to go off on tangents, but you did remind me of something, that the audience reaction is priceless. That's one of the, if I had to apply to what I said in my last thing about what can we identify the elements and replace them, I don't know how to replace that. In that performance where I dressed in costume and I was afraid to go on stage and all that, this was actually a plus. One of my props failed. I had an oxygen tank. It was a welding tank on a moving dolly, and the respirator tube paperclip fell off. And during the performance, even though I was hidden from the audience and I wasn't speaking the dialogue because I was so afraid to actually experience my own vulnerability, I was in character and reacted to that malfunction in my costume. And I was trying to, hey, costume malfunction. And I was trying to plug that tube back into the thing. And that got this huge laugh. I never expected that. And I forgot I was up there being reacted to, you know what I mean? Until this random little, oh, I'm staying in character. I may as well have been in my room alone playing, I'm this character. That's my mindset at the time. But until the audience reacted to that, which I didn't think was funny or even incidental at all to the performance, I just wanted to fix that little detail because my character would have wanted to keep breathing. And it registered in a way that their reaction, it validated. It didn't just validate it. I don't know. It felt like this wasn't just a game anymore. Like it was affecting other people, and it was being paid attention to. The audience reaction, it just reminds you that your communications and your actions have impact, and yeah, it fuels you. I cannot, despite what I said in the positive light about replacing certain elements, I can't think of a way to replace that.
I think that's so important. I think from the smallest scale, from performance ensemble, you got a costume on, no speaking roles. I think that performance, that audience driving factor is exactly the same, I feel, as the most famous pop star in America. They are probably, they lost their audience, and that's probably a lot of musicians are probably really going through some really painful things, like you, Fernando. This is it. I think this is kind of the collective struggle here for the performer, whether it is performance art or music or theater, whatever it may be. It's just there is that loss. I see that now.
But we've identified it. You don't have to have the solution the instant you identify it. So maybe there is one.
Exactly, and it's coming.
Yeah,
The simulation will continue to develop.
It's funny. I was about to ask you guys too. It's how do we come up with a way to, I guess, sort of mourn that loss, but be able to cope with it, right? And I don't know. I guess just get back to where we were before, but probably isn't our job to do that. It probably isn't an answer right now.
We're in speculation land. I mean, how are we going to bring what we've learned with us back to when we're back to where we were? are we going to bring something with us from what we've gone through, as far as performance goes? Are we going to integrate any of this into when we're back to doing with all of the abilities, I guess is the best way to put it, that we had, with all the facilities we had available to us to do performance? Will we now have something to integrate into that further? Will it synthesize? Will it be a new thing based on, in the scheme of things, this is going to be really brief. And at least our culture and our population here demonstrates that memory lasts 3 seconds. So will this even affect us overall? But
right.
It's just a speculative thought.
I think you can also mourn this loss with a creative performance about this loss.
Yeah.
Yep. So performance ensemble-esque.
Yeah.
Totally the niche.
Yeah, and that's the thing too, that like it's like how are we going to bring everything that we've been experiencing for the last 7 months that have simultaneously felt like a blink of an eye, but also the longest, most painful torture I've felt, right? And it's so weird to me, because it's like, because I think it's going to happen in 2 ways. I think that students are going to bring it, like the current students now are going to bring it into this show that they're doing right now, because it's not like it's new, right? Like they've already experienced it for 7 months. So I feel like that's going to be a part of their show, but how is it going to be, again, speculation, right? It's like, how is it going to be different when they bring it again, but this time in a live performance? And like, I think to me, I feel like my attitude would change towards specific things, right? Like whenever we were told, hey, we can't afford to perform in a theater, I was like, fuck, man, like I can't, like I really want to perform in a theater, but we can't. We have to do it in a hallway. And obviously, like, we didn't complain. Like, we did our thing, and we did it as best as we could. But like, like I think a lot of that might change. It's like, oh, we get the hallway now. Like, we don't have to do this from our bedroom with our not so great quality camera phones. Like it I don't know. It's
a new appreciation will sprout from this. The gratitude for the things that we had and were able to perform with, but we were already so spoiled with.
Yeah.
We were already spoiled, but we wanted more. But now that that's all cut off, whatever we had is going to be what we're already desiring.
Yeah, it's a question of contrast. A cold bath is warm compared to an ice cube, but you had the theater at one point, and so the hallway sucked, but some might go, the hallway's awesome. Look at these lines, and then then you had to go from the hallway to online, and you're like, damn it, I love that hallway. And now people who start with that are probably like, this is cool. Work within the constraints. We're producing this, and
perspective.
And take that back up the line. I can't say that everything's going to seem, maybe the hallway would suck compared to online for someone who started there, because what do we do with all this extra space? It's distracting from the tightly focused, frame we're used to. I'm just talking off the top of my head, but I think it's in the contrasts. And also but for you personally, the nightmare you're going through is it's endurance, and you're going to come out of this, and the rest of life is going to be that much sweeter, no matter the proximal distance as you move into the future. I think some part of you is always going to remember this is just that much better when because you've endured something.
Wow.
Something we never want to do and wouldn't do voluntarily unless you want to be a Navy SEAL or something, but or some crazy job where you get tortured to get the job. But endurance is weird because it makes your life so much better, but no one would volunteer for it.
Oh yeah, no one wants to volunteer to go through the darkness, but you have to see the light at the end of the tunnel.
And if you don't, your life's going to be a little more drab. Overall, you're getting a lot back for enduring something, but no one does it voluntarily. But life becomes better if you make it to the other side. It's not guaranteed you will, but in this case, I think we're looking at more than 99% chance we're going to be.
Yeah, I think we'll see it. I think we'll see the other side.
Yeah, what's funny to me though is, and this might feel like a little bit left field, but I swear that I was trying to connect it to something you just said right now. Is earlier you mentioned how that some of the things that you lose, aside from the fact that aside from losing an audience, is losing things like smell. And to me, that's funny, but it's so true, because like, I feel like whenever I think about rehearsals, I just think about really sweaty, really hot bodies. Some of us are just running on like 3 cans of Rockstar. You know, I'm looking directly at Sam.
I'm looking at you.
Yeah, no, I would sweat up a storm too, and it's just like it was never really gross in the moment. We just always thought it was a funny thing, but looking at it from the outside, it seems like it's kind of this like visceral sort of negative thing that you don't want. But it's sad how you lose that, and you kind of miss that too. Like, I mean, it just doesn't compare to performing inside your room. That, you know, if you're lucky enough, you have AC, and it's like, man, this isn't it, you know. And yeah, it's weird. It's weird the things that you lose, and the more you think about it, you never would have thought to yourselves like, that's something I lost. Like, I lost being in a room full of sweaty people.
Yeah.
And I miss
I gotta
that.
say, you're only socially conditioned to say that's gross. For the first like 7 or 8 days, the human animal does not smell bad. I mean, we're conditioned to say that, you know, we're conditioned to go, I want my Axe body spray. You know, I gotta make those shareholders happy. So we've been like shaped to think that we smell bad. And I defy that 100%. I do not want to.
Go, Mark.
Of that. Yeah. Oh, can I say that online?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a knee-jerk reaction. Yeah. I go into auto not swearing when I'm around little kids, but otherwise I kind of speak freely. Yeah. But you know what I'm saying? Like, I mean, at some level, we know that this is our smell, and there's a fellowship in that. That's what it's supposed to be. That was what we do. That's what's been working over millions of years. But yeah, before the advent of, you know, commercialized perfumes.
Yeah, but no, that's what I mean though. Like, just think back to the black box and what that, like, you can still smell the black box from here. It just smells, it's humid. It's humid in there. It smells like people, you know. It smells like the carpets haven't been cleaned in years.
Yeah.
And it's so weird.
Yeah. Our aversion to this stuff does not make sense. It's conditioned into us for a purpose, I think. But okay, now I'm not getting conspiratorial, but for whatever reason, we go, ew, gross, or even bugs are gross. It's like, not really. You know, we've been told that from the day we could be told anything, and about smell and what certain animals are cute and what certain animals are horrifying. And we live our whole lives with that like it's a fact. And you know, most people don't explore like that. I'm not big. I like phenomenology better than objectivity, but there objectively is no reason for us to be disgusted with certain things. With certain things we're disgusted with, there's definitely a reason. You know, like certain things are toxic and poisonous right out the gate. No pun intended, but you know, it's like, yeah. So, but there's a ton. More often than not, there's no reason for us to have aversions. They're socially enforced.
Yeah, I mean, and just all that to say that there are a lot of things that we just never really consider, but looking now, it's just, I think that there's so much more than just losing the audience, right? Which is what I was saying last week, and so that's why I appreciated the question that you had, Sam, because it really makes you think about everything else that you also lost in addition to that. And I don't know, I guess it's just an interesting thing to navigate and see how you can get it back, or see how you can just cope with not having that while you're performing. You know, yeah, I think that's the little weird thing that I had just thinking right now.
No, yeah, and it's really just an uphill battle from here, I think, for everyone. And I'm gonna go ahead and bring this to a close, but before that, I wanted to ask you both if there's any lasting comments you'd like to make for everyone.
Yeah, I have one really quick. If you're not registered to vote, you know, I think the deadline is today to register to vote. And if you're not registered, then obviously have conversations with people who are registered and be informed and help inform them, because not everybody speaks a lot of this like weird legalese that they use in ballot information, right? So it makes it really confusing to know what you're voting for. If you are registered, make sure to read up on all the measures, not just like who you're voting for, but all the ballot measures that are on there, because it's super important, because it affects you and it affects everybody else. Yeah, and just do things with social conscience.
Yeah.
Thank you, Fernando.
I wanna reinforce what Fernando just said. Actually, that's more valuable than anything I can think of we're saying right now. This is a one door has a tiger behind it, type situation. This is the end. This is like the fork. There is no paths after this. So this election is going to determine the future of not the country, but the globe and the human race. I mean, we saw how fast other countries adapted to our authoritarian bent immediately. I mean, so whatever happens, this is it. This is the final fork. And when you say read up on the propositions, these aren't as crucial because, the general election is crucial and the Senate's crucial. But those propositions, I just want to throw this in. Read the arguments for and against. Don't just read the description of the proposition. And also at the end of the arguments, read who is supporting the proposition. Because the way they're worded, sometimes they're Orwellian, meaning they mean the opposite of what you think they mean. You've got to read the whole thing. It's like 3 pages per proposition. But if you're going to focus and do a, Adler's How to Read a Book on the proposition, go straight to who's supporting, and that gives you a big clue. And then almost as important, pretty much as important, is read the arguments for and against. Don't read the description of the proposition. Read that last. And then once you read the arguments for and against and who's supporting it, you're going to see a lot of the doublespeak in there. You'll see what I'm saying. But don't trust the descriptions of the propositions. Read them. I was surprised at a couple of them. So when I read the arguments for and against, it really, at least maybe it's just the way I read the initial presentation. But yeah, but the general election, this is, if you don't vote, obviously we're not telling people who to vote for, but it kind of, it depends on what future you want and how long you want it to last. It's really that important. And we're not talking like down the road. We're talking about within most people's lifetimes. How long do you want the future to last? Because internationally, it could go 2 ways right now. And maybe there's a third way I can't even imagine, but this is a fork and I don't see many branches after that. So Fernando, you nailed it. That's the most important thing to say right now. If you have not voted, that's the most important thing you could be doing for your longevity.
Beautiful.
It's like having a cyanide habit. Now's the time to quit taking cyanide. Like one more dose. Like this is the time to address that issue. Like it's your priority is voting, because that's the only thing most of us have open to us as impacting this reality.
Mark says this is the end. And this is the end of this podcast.
It's the last major choice. You know what I mean? One road I see has branches after that. There's still work to do. One road just fades. It doesn't even go off into the distance or the darkness. It just, you can see cracks in the floor and the floor is gone. What's down there? Who knows? But it's not good.
Scary. It's scary down there.
Flashlight and it's still falling for 3 days. It's a pretty deep hole. So yeah. If that makes sense, but for now you nailed it. It's D-Day for democracy.
Thank you guys so much, both of you. This was CSUN Performance Ensembles, a conversation with. Thank you so much again, Mark. My name is Samantha Garcia, and
I am not Jefferson Denham. My name is Fernando Martinez.
And I'm Mark Farrell.
Thank you so much, Mark, one of our favorite people in the world. I'm so happy you joined us today. And hi, Pluto, look at her. Okay.
That is awesome.
Perfect way to close this out, Katie. Bye.
Bye.